Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. The term data storytelling has been trending for some time. So it seems that every industry is talking about data storytelling at the moment. But how does it fare in the United Nations world, and how can it be done in SDG reporting? Today, I will discuss the basic concepts of data storytelling and how to develop a powerful data story for your audience. So before we start, let's look at this example together. So this is infographics that someone made for 2020 International Year of Plant Health. So in the text part, the author talks about the sample size and the surveying method and the list, and gives the list of participating countries. And then tops on that, the author presents a data chart that shows, that visualize the data they gathered from this survey. So my question for you is this a data story? Would you think about the whole package? Do you get anything out of it? So here comes like my understanding of this particular infographic. It does not have a key message. That's my observation. And it does not have a logical flow, and only presents the results of the data analysis that the author or the statisticians or the data scientists have done. And also, I would say it is a collage of facts. In my opinion, it is not a data story. So as a follow-up to that, what is a data story? And after all, what is data storytelling? And that is the topic of today's presentation. In the first part of my presentation, we're going to see what is data storytelling and some basic concepts. Here we have another question. So does data speak for itself? So we know data helps us better measure and understanding things. It is very powerful. It changes perceptions and drives changes and actions. However, can data do these things on its own? I would say occasionally. And oftentimes, no. Most of the times, data does not speak for itself because data gives the what, but only humans know the why and the so what. As Hans Rosling said once, numbers are boring, people are interesting. So as data storytellers or communicators or whoever who works with data, you need to look at the numbers, but also understand the lives and the meanings behind these numbers. So Hans Rosling is a Swedish professor of international health, and he was a strong advocate for using data or data visualization to explore development issues. He was an exceptional speaker. So I hyperlinked one of his talks here. So if you want to understand or if you want to explore further, feel free. You won't be disappointed. And I also want to share some interesting findings about the human brain. So scientists found that being told a story drastically changes the way our brains work. When people hear neutral words like chair or key or desk, the language processing parts of our brain are activated. However, when people are told a story, not only the language processing parts are activated, but also the sensory areas that our brain used to experience the story. For example, if we hear the word coffee or perfume, the area on our brains that are related to the sense of smell will also light up. So all in all, our brain is more stimulated by stories. Data, facts, and the logic are not the natural favorites of our brain. So if we want to communicate the data or the findings, the results of the data to an audience, and then to ensure the data stay with our audience, we better communicate the data via stories. So here's the core question. What is data storytelling? There are so many definitions of data storytelling, but I would say most of them contain the same core elements. So the version I put it up here consists of all the core elements. Let's read it together. So data storytelling is a multidisciplinary process It is not only about data science, it's not only about the analytics. This process combines the results of data analysis with compelling narratives and presents the combination via text and visuals to inform, engage, and influence the audience. So, to summarize, data storytelling has four core components. On the left side, design, or we call it data visualization or creation. This is a creative process. And also data, of course, that's the foundational thing, and that's the foundational element where all the rest of the story comes from. And I think you are probably most familiar with this part. And the design, the data, these two components are the more obvious components of the whole data storytelling process. But on the other side, we have two components that are less visible, yet very, very important. The first one is the context that contains information about our audience and also about communication goals that we set for our data stories or data communications. And another thing is narrative. So by way of narrative, we're talking about the messaging, we're talking about the structure of your data story, we're also talking about the language you're using in drafting your data story. So these two elements or components sometimes are less visible or neglected. When we hear data visualization or data storytelling, we always think about the charts, we also think about like whether the data work is robust. But seldom we think about like who our audiences are, how are we going to present the whole story to them, and what's the key message, what's the key takeaway our audience will get out of the data story. So today, I will mostly focus on talking about these two less visible components of data storytelling. So we have seen data stories everywhere, in reports, in articles, presentations, infographics, and even a chart with a powerful headline could be a mini data story, and also web pages. So there are many more other places we see data stories. Data stories come in many shapes, forms, and sizes. And then here's an example of a data story that I pull out from Save the Children annual report. So this is their 2020 report, and it has the online version, it also has a print version. So on this little chart, we already have 4 mini like highlights or insights, and each of them can be a little data story. And together, they form a more powerful overarching narrative to present what Save the Children did in year 2020 and whether more actions are needed to help them to make even bigger progress. So that's one example of a data story. And here is also a data story. It's just like a mini chart with a headline. This is a chart from a report that I pull out from the World Intellectual Property Organization's website. So probably you've seen like this kind of data stories everywhere. You've also seen this kind of stories everywhere. So my point is, no matter the story is big or small, and today we're going to touch upon some basic rules or foundations that help you to analyze the whole process of developing or constructing a narrative for your data story. And that's pretty much about the basic concepts or the core elements of data storytelling. So we're going to see next, what does data storytelling look like in SDG reporting, the field that we're familiar with? So SDG reporting is not easy. It needs to process or gather or present a massive amount of data and then cover progress in many continents and territories, countries, regarding over 200 SDG indicators. So not to mention all the technical terms that are very critical in SDG discussions. So by nature, SDG materials are rich, dense, and content heavy. To many people, they're not very easy to understand. And then to make things even more challenging for data storytellers in SDG reporting. And you are dealing with an exceptionally broad audience. You're writing or developing your data stories for media, for government agencies, international organizations, and the general public, and many, many more. So each of these like subgroups of the audience has their own interests, priorities, and preferences. This makes it even more challenging for you as a data storyteller. And what's the solution to this challenge? You have to analyze your audience or your audiences like much better. Here are some key questions that you could use in audience analysis. But there is like one particularly important question that you need to ask yourself is how experienced are audiences with data in general and with the SDG data in particular? Are they layman or are they fluent? And also, what are the audience care about in the data story, in your data story? Do they want to know more about the key messages, or are they interested in the microdata or metadata? So the more specific you know your audience, the more likely you're going to tell a successful story, data story for your audiences. And then there are like even more in-depth efforts made by some national statistic agencies in defining their audiences or categorizing their audiences into different personas. So I provide a hyperlink here. If you want to know more about this topic, feel free to explore. So let's see data in terms of like putting data stories into genres. I would say data stories roughly fall into two groups: informative and persuasive. Informative data stories are normally the things that we see on media, like in the form of data journalism from New York Times, from Economist, Wall Street Journal, National Geographic. And also on the other end of the spectrum is persuasive data stories. Those are things that we normally see in marketing, like the campaigns that can drive customers to buy things, or even things that people like want to use to motivate people to donate. Those kind of things, those are called persuasive data stories. So SDG data stories roughly fall in between, leaning towards informative. But we do see SDG data stories are used in program documents or even fundraising campaigns, like by agencies, by UN agencies or other agencies at the national levels. So I would say mostly SDG data stories are aimed to inform, but like they are also used to motivate action. This grouping naturally leads to the two kinds of objectives of data storytelling in SDG reporting. So the immediate objectives of data storytelling in SDG reporting are presenting patterns and trends, or sharing insights and observations. But in the long run, we would like to use the data stories and data storytelling techniques to influence perceptions and generate or drive actions towards meeting the SDG goals. So we need to approach data storytelling from two different angles: the immediate things that we want to achieve and the long-term things that we want to achieve. So all in all, SDG data storytellers need to understand you're wearing two hats. One hat is that you are a data analyst. In this role, you do things from bottom up. You collect, process, and analyze data. And you want to make sense of data, and you want to find the what. And then after you're done with your data analysis, you need to wear another hat, that is the data storyteller hat. In that role, you're going to communicate your findings in a top-down process. You're not only showing people the results of your data analysis, you're also telling data stories, helping your audience to make meaning of your findings. So basically, you're highlighting not only the what, but also the so what and the why for your audience. So let's see an example. So this is an example from the OECD Better Life Index. And then you can see the authors use some visual cues to highlight their results of data analysis at the very end of their paragraphs. I would say this is not effective data communicating, not only because the key messages are put in the end of the paragraphs, but also there is no insight. There's no key message whatsoever. This is just a description of their data analysis results. It's very similar to the soulless infographics that we saw at the beginning of this presentation. By contrast, this is the infographics from the UN Women website. It is a fact sheet about rural women and girls. And we can see on the left side, there is the overarching narrative that shows gender inequality. Gender inequalities are restricting rural girls and women's full potential and leaving them far behind men and their urban counterparts. And on the left side, this is only part of the whole infographic. So this overall narrative is supported by many data stories. This is on the right side is one of them. So it is not only showing the results of data analysis, all the numbers, 64% and some other numbers. It also shows the consequences of how women are tied up to rural work is impacting their lives. So this is a more compelling data story. Not only helps people to know the numbers, but also know the meaning of numbers. So this shows the mindset change, how the mindset change can drive people to develop totally different data stories. With that, we are going to move on to some how-tos, which are the practical tips on how to tell data stories in SDG reporting. So there are two very simple golden rules. The first one is to keep it simple. And then you need a crisp storyline with a key message, and then preferably less than or equal to 3 core arguments, so it's not too much for the audience to digest. You need a clear, powerful title. You need to try to minimize the use of jargon and some difficult words to make it as accessible to your audience or audiences as possible. And you also need to use visuals strategically. And another golden rule is bring a perspective. Please don't show only the results of the analysis, but also explain, bring out the meanings for your audience. Now let's quickly explore all these rules and components one by one. The first step in data storytelling is to locate a story in data. So there are 4 commonly used approaches. First one is identify trends and patterns. Second one, draw comparisons. Third, look for correlations. And the last one, check on outliers. There may be other approaches that you can use because you're experts on data, so you know how to approach, how to pull out the stories out of it. So these are only 4 of the most commonly used approaches. So here's a quick example to show how we can use the same data set to tell very different stories. So this is a chart from the SDG report 2021 on stunting. It shows the programs made globally and also in different regions on stunting from 2020 to 2000 to 2020. So for the same data set, basically you can tell the trends and patterns show to compare how global 2020 with global 2000 to highlight the progress the world has made. You can also compare the 3 regions that have the highest numbers in 2020 and in 2000, which are Oceania, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Central and South Asia. You can compare these 3 with the rest of the world as a comparison. You can also show how these 3 regions have some maybe hidden correlations with each other. Are there some common factors that are driving their stunting numbers high? And there is another possibility to just focus on Oceania. Oceania is the only region that has higher stunting statistics in 2020 than in 2000. It might be interesting. There might be a story behind it, why it is so. So this is an example to show that we could use the same data set for very different storylines. So you need, as data storytellers, it's better to test all the options to find the one that is most relevant for your audience. And another component for data storytelling is how to write a data story title. So here I'm introducing the SMART rule. By way of SMART, it is I meant it's specific, measurable, action-oriented, relevant, time-bound. These are the 5 key components for a smart or a good data story title. I have to say, you don't need to have all 5 to make it a good title. Sometimes there might be 1 or 2 missing, but you can still make it very clear. So here are some smart titles or headlines. And then by rule of thumb, news stories or media normally have very, very eye-catching and compelling, powerful titles. If you want to explore, use these 3 examples, and you can also check news stories and then try to analyze why they're effective and why they're not effective. So everything has some load on your audience, the colors and the words and everything. So it is important to make your titles as clear and powerful as possible, so you can reduce the cognitive load on the audience to make their process digesting your information more smoothly. And now let's talk about how to write the key messages. There are 3 steps. Construct the key message as a big idea. Provide essential information as in the forms of the 5 famous W's, and also how. And the last one is to show the meaning of your data. I cannot emphasize this enough. It is very important to show your insights, your perspective, instead of just presenting your core statistical findings. Here's a quick example from the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board report. And it has a very powerful key message. It has an insight. This is a description about how the world reacts to COVID-19 for the 2nd year. And the overall insight is the response is marked by inequalities and the failure of leaders to understand the interconnectedness and act accordingly. And this is, of course, supported by the key statistical findings in terms of the vaccinations. The doses of COVID-19 vaccines used in developing nations, in high-income, sorry, not in high-income countries versus in low-income countries. So combine these two, the narrative, the insight with the findings, make the key messages super compelling. So this is a rather bad example taken from the New Yorker magazine. You can see all the beautiful charts. This is about how New York, how the author maps the noisiest neighborhoods in New York, about noises in New York. They created all these beautiful charts and to show different size of the noises in the city. However, if you click the hyperlink to read the story, you're going to see there are no key messages, there are no insight whatsoever. And then after reading the article, the audiences are going to be buried with all the data, all the visuals, without any key takeaways to come top of their mind. And then we comes to the structure, how we're going to structure a data story. I'm going to introduce 2 models. The first one is very commonly used by media and then talked a lot in the data storytelling world. This is the inverted pyramid model. Basically, you need to put all your essential information up front. That's what the journalists normally call a lead in the very first paragraph. It answers the questions about who, what, when, where, why, and how. And then you provide the supporting details and then even more background additional information. So this is like easier for the editors actually when it was created, because if like the space is limited in print media, they can start chopping down from the very bottom. Here is an example from the Gates Foundation's the latest Goalkeepers report. I strongly encourage you to visit their website because it's interactive visuals and it's very fun to watch. This is a section talking about the impact of COVID-19 on poverty. So the key message analyzed, or the key structure analyzed in the inverted pyramid goes like this. The lead or the core argument, the core message, 31 million more people were pushed into extreme poverty due to COVID. And after the author talks about this, and they provided more supporting details to talk about there is a gender inequality in this phenomenon, because women continue to be disproportionately affected by COVID-19's economic and social impacts. And the additional information comes after, and they provide the numbers about women's employment and whether it's going to rebound soon in comparison with men's employment data. So this is a roughly inverted pyramid model that you can see commonly used in technical writing, like the SDG reporting or in the news stories. And there is another model I want to quickly touch upon that is also a pyramid, but the other way around. It's called the pyramid model. And it's commonly used in the private sector, particularly management consulting industry. And it's a powerful tool for communication. It's also a powerful tool for thinking and organizing your thoughts and your facts. Basically, you need to bring out your conclusion up front in the form of a key message. And then you support your key message with up to 3 arguments. And then further down the road, you're going to provide the supporting details, additional details. So this is the simplest form of the pyramid principle. There is a whole book about it if you want to read it. It's called The Pyramid Principles, written by Barbara Minto. It's a very, very interesting, compelling book. I strongly recommend. Here's a quick example on using the pyramid principle to organize your article, your stories. This is a story from Marine Stewardship Council report. You can find it on their website. It's talking about why people need to fish in a more sustainable way. And this particular section talks about the ocean is vast. So the key message, the ocean is vast. And then after that, it provides 3 arguments. You can see in these 3 little infographics. And then further down the pyramid, and there are details to support argument 2 and argument 3. So after all these analysis, we're coming to writing your story. So I got this question from maybe the person who's asking the question is here, or maybe not. But anyway, I received this question through Yuxi, and then somebody is asking, how can we avoid jargon? So I put it like, I didn't put avoid the use of jargon. I'm saying try to minimize the use of jargon, try to minimize the use of acronyms and technical terms. Basically, you are talking about something that is difficult. It's necessary sometimes to use the terms. Try to use easy substitutes. If you cannot find a substitute, you have to use the technical terms or jargon or acronyms. You have to explain it when it first appears. And make sure you repeat that, and then try to make sure your audience follows along. And don't make it hard for them to understand in the first place. And then you have to make it easy for them to enter the whole narrative with technical terms, and to make it easy for them to follow along in your text, in your story. So these are some general writing tips for you when you're developing a data story. It is very important to put your key message first. And of this one, use headlines, headings, etc. These are all visual aids that I strongly recommend that you use when you are developing your data stories or you're developing your data visualization pieces. And quickly, I want to highlight the print writing is very different from web writing. So don't just put your reports, your PDF reports, cut, copy, and paste on the website because they're different. And people are expecting different things. Web content is very fast. It needs to be concise. It can be complete or fragmented. So here are some tips that you can use to repurpose your print materials for the web. And I would say you can use many of them even in your PDF, in your print materials, and to make it more reader-friendly, audience-friendly, to make it a fast, crisp, and engaging. I'm almost done with all the presentation on data storytelling and data storytelling in SDG. But the last thing I want to emphasize is that there's no right way to data storytelling. There are so many powerful data stories presented everywhere on the website. So I would encourage you to explore all the creative ways to develop a narrative and to present it visually. Here are two very interesting examples that I pull out from a website called flowingdata.com. And then the one on the right side is from 538.com. It's a very famous political data consulting firms that is big when we were going through the elections last year in the United States. So there are many, many resources. I would encourage you to be creative and then to be open-minded. It's going to help you in data storytelling, in SDG reporting. And I would encourage you to think beyond data storytelling to get your communications strategies and plans upfront early and then get ready for all the fun. So this brings to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.